A millionaire weds, a defiant girl on a dare, but what he discovers that night changes everything. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. The chandeliers of the Avalon Grand Hotel shimmered like liquid gold, reflecting off the crystal glasses and the perfectly pressed tuxedos of New York's elite. In the center of that glittering chaos stood Ethan Cole, the youngest self-made millionaire in the city, known for his precision, his arrogance, and the rumors that he had never lost a bet. That night, surrounded by his wealthy friends and the low hum of classical music, a champagne glass clinked against another. His friend Marcus smirked and said loudly enough for the room to hear, "You think you can buy loyalty, charm, or love, Ethan? Tell me, would you dare marry a woman who does not care about your money?" Laughter rippled through the group. Ethan's jaw tightened, but the edge of a smile curved his lips. "Name the terms." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "The first woman who refuses you tonight. No assistants, no actresses, no heiresses. A real woman. You have 7 days to convince her to marry you." Ethan turned, scanning the ballroom. Across the room, a young woman balanced a silver tray with trembling hands, her black hair tied back, her white shirt slightly wrinkled from a long shift. Her name tag read Lena Hart. When a rude guest snapped his fingers at her, she only smiled, firm and unshaken. Something in her defiance caught his attention. He walked toward her, the crowd parting as whispers followed. She looked up, startled by the tailored suit and cold blue eyes staring back at her. "Miss," he said evenly, "how much would it take for you to marry me?" Her eyebrows shot up. "Excuse me?" "You heard me. A legal marriage. 1 week from now." The tray nearly slipped from her hands. "Is this some kind of joke?" Ethan leaned closer, his tone smooth but challenging. "Consider it a proposal, or a dare." For a heartbeat, she searched his face, expecting laughter. There was none, only pride, and something wounded hiding behind it. The ballroom had gone silent. Cameras turned. Lena set the tray down, squared her shoulders, and said, "You are out of your mind, Mr. Millionaire. But if it will prove something to you, fine. I accept your dare." A collective gasp swept through the room. Ethan's smile finally broke. The game had begun. Neither of them knew that this reckless deal, born of pride and defiance, would soon become the one thing neither of them could walk away from. The next morning, sunlight filtered through the tall glass windows of the Avalon Grand's presidential suite, bouncing off marble floors and muted gold decor. Ethan Cole stood before the window, coffee in hand, watching the city stretch awake beneath him. His reflection stared back at him, tailored, composed, but beneath the expensive armor, something uneasy stirred. He had not expected her to say yes. Not the girl with the stubborn chin and the fire that refused to bow. Yet Lena Hart had looked him straight in the eye, in front of an entire ballroom, and called his dare. She had taken his arrogance and turned it into a challenge of her own. For a man used to control, the unpredictability of her answer lingered like static in the air. Downstairs, the newspapers had already run their headlines. Ethan Cole's midnight proposal, scandal or strategy? Cameras had caught every angle of his smirk, every flicker of Lena's defiance. Some called it a publicity stunt. Others whispered about an eccentric millionaire gone mad. Ethan ignored them all. He had weathered worse storms. But this woman was different. In a cramped apartment across the city, Lena stared at the same headline on her cracked phone screen. The picture showed her half-turned, tray still in hand, eyes fierce. The comment section burned with cruelty. She must be desperate. Gold digger. How much did he pay her to play along? She turned off the phone and pressed her palms to her face. Her mother's voice broke the silence from the other room. "Lena, what is all this nonsense on the news?" Lena took a deep breath and walked to the doorway. "It is nothing, Mom. Just rich people being stupid. I am not really marrying him." "Oh." Her mother frowned. "I hope not. That kind of man." She coughed, weak and shallow. The sound made Lena's chest tighten. The doctor's bills were stacked on the kitchen counter like a tower of threats. Rent was late again. The small bookstore they ran was weeks away from closing. When the phone rang that afternoon, the voice on the other end was cool and professional. "Miss Hart, this is Patricia Ward, assistant to Mr. Ethan Cole. He has requested a meeting at his office today at 3 o'clock. He said you would know why." Lena froze. "Tell him I am not interested." "I am afraid," he insisted. "And Miss Hart, he is sending a car." The line went dead before she could argue. At exactly 3, a black sedan waited at the curb outside her building. The driver held the door open without a word. Inside, Lena's reflection trembled faintly in the tinted glass as the car sliced through Manhattan traffic. She could almost hear her own heart over the city noise. Ethan's office occupied the top floor of the Cole Industries tower. Glass, steel, and silence. When the elevator doors opened, she was met by a receptionist who greeted her with a polite but curious smile. "Mr. Cole is expecting you." The double doors swung open, revealing Ethan behind a massive oak desk, sleeves rolled to his elbows, the skyline framing him like a painting of power. He looked up, calm, as if yesterday had been a business meeting instead of a public dare. "Miss Hart," he said, motioning to the chair across from him. "Please sit." "I am not sitting," she replied. "You humiliated me last night in front of everyone. Whatever joke you think this is, it is not a joke." He slid a thin folder across the desk. Inside was a legal document, stamped and signed. "A marriage contract. 7 days from now. You said yes, remember?" Lena stared at the paper. "You cannot be serious." "I am always serious," Ethan said. "It is a legal union. 6 months. You will be compensated, and afterward, you are free to walk away." "Compensated," she repeated, her voice thick with disbelief. "You are offering me money to marry you?" "I am offering you freedom from your debts, and medical coverage for your mother. Everything you need." Her pulse thundered in her ears. "Why me?" Ethan met her gaze, expression unreadable. "Because you said no before you said yes. You are not afraid to stand your ground. I need that." She let out a shaky laugh. "You are unbelievable." "Maybe, but I always keep my word." He leaned back, eyes cold but curious. "You have 48 hours to decide." Lena stood, clutching the folder. "I do not need 48 hours. I already know my answer." He raised an eyebrow. "And?" She stepped closer, the fire returning to her eyes. "I will do it. But not for you. For her." She nodded toward the window, toward the world outside, the one that had never once bent in her favor. "And when this ends, you and your world go back to pretending I do not exist." Ethan's jaw tensed. "Deal." As she turned to leave, he added quietly, "There will be a press statement tomorrow. Prepare yourself, Mrs. Cole." The elevator doors closed between them with a soft hiss. Lena leaned her head back, eyes burning. The city stretched below, cold, bright, and merciless. Somewhere in its golden towers, a man was playing a game he thought he could control. But for the first time in his life, Ethan Cole had made a wager with someone who played for keeps. 2 days later, rain swept across the city, tracing silver lines down the glass walls of Cole Tower. Inside, Lena Hart sat in the reception area outside Ethan Cole's office, the signed contract folded neatly in her purse. She had read it 3 times. 6 months of marriage. A monthly allowance. Her mother's medical expenses covered in full. At the end of it, a quiet divorce and a signed non-disclosure agreement. Everything legal, everything cold. She stared at her reflection in the marble floor. The same woman who had served drinks in a wrinkled white shirt now wore a borrowed beige blazer and a black skirt that fit almost right. Her shoes pinched, but she refused to shift. The receptionist looked up with practiced politeness. "Mr. Cole will see you now." Lena stepped inside. The room was filled with light and glass and the faint hum of city traffic below. Ethan stood near the window, phone in hand, his tone clipped and professional. "Yes, transfer the funds to the charity by noon, and make sure the press gets the corrected statement before the evening broadcast." He ended the call and turned toward her, his expression unreadable. "So, Miss Hart," he said, gesturing toward the leather chair across from him. "I assume your answer stands?" "Yes," she said. Her voice did not waver. I signed it. He nodded once, sliding the folder toward him. Good. The wedding will be private. 2 witnesses, my lawyer and your mother, if she wishes to attend. Lena folded her arms. My mother is not strong enough to travel, and she does not need to know the details. Ethan studied her for a moment, then simply said, Understood. Silence stretched between them. Through the window, the skyline gleamed under the rain, gray and endless. Ethan finally broke it. Do you have any conditions of your own? She tilted her head slightly. Only one. Do not treat me like an employee. Something flickered in his eyes. Amusement maybe, or respect. Fair enough. Then let us begin. The ceremony took place in the private hall of the courthouse downtown. No flowers, no guests, no music. Just the sound of rain outside and the echo of footsteps on stone. Lena wore a simple cream dress borrowed from a friend. Ethan wore the same black suit he wore to board meetings. The officiant cleared his throat, reading the vows in a low, steady voice. Ethan repeated the words without hesitation. Lena's voice was soft but certain. When it came time for the rings, the officiant looked between them. Lena hesitated. I do not have a ring. Ethan reached into his pocket and produced a plain silver band. I took the liberty of choosing something simple. She slipped it on her finger without looking at him. It fits. He nodded. It was meant to. The officiant closed the book and declared them husband and wife. No applause. No kiss. Just a faint rustle of paper as the legal documents were signed. Outside, the rain had stopped. Ethan offered her an umbrella, but she shook her head. I will take a cab. He raised an eyebrow. You are my wife now. You do not take cabs in the rain. Lena met his gaze unflinching. I am your wife on paper, Mr. Cole. I still decide how I go home. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then he stepped aside, letting her pass. The sound of her heels faded down the marble steps. Later that night, Lena sat by her mother's bedside in the small apartment that smelled faintly of lavender and tea. Her mother slept soundly for the first time in weeks. Her breathing even, peaceful. The envelope of medical receipts on the table had been replaced by a note from the hospital. All expenses cleared by Cole Industries. Lena traced the silver band on her finger, the metal cold against her skin. It felt heavy, not with gold, but with meaning. A deal, a debt, a promise she had made to survive. Across town, Ethan stood on the balcony of his penthouse, staring at the city lights flickering like 1,000 restless thoughts. His assistant, Patricia, handed him a tablet. The press is eating it up. They are calling it a mystery marriage. Half the world thinks it is for publicity. Ethan gave a thin smile. Let them think whatever they want. They always do. Patricia hesitated. Do you want me to prepare the announcement for the company shareholders? Not yet, he said quietly. Let them wonder. When she left, he poured himself a glass of bourbon, the amber liquid catching the city's glow. He thought about the girl who had met his arrogance with fire. He thought about how she had not taken the car, how she had refused comfort like a challenge. It had been a long time since someone had looked at him and seen a man instead of a fortune. Ethan set the glass down and turned back toward the city. Somewhere, down among the millions of lights, his new wife was fighting her own battles. He had married her on a dare, but something in the quiet of that thought unsettled him. For a man who lived by contracts and numbers, Ethan Cole could not explain why he kept replaying her voice in his mind. She had said, I will do it, but not for you. And for the first time, the word why lingered longer than he cared to admit. The following week, the morning sun fell softly across the Cole estate, a vast stone mansion perched on the edge of the Hudson River. The wedding had taken place only 4 days earlier, yet for Lena Hart, it already felt like a lifetime. She stood in the grand entryway, her small suitcase beside her, gazing at the marble staircase that curved like a frozen wave. Everything gleamed. The air smelled faintly of polished wood and lilies. It did not feel like a home, it felt like a museum of silence. Ethan Cole appeared at the top of the stairs, dressed in a gray suit, his tie perfectly aligned, his voice calm as he descended. You are early, he said. Lena lifted her chin. You told me to move in today. I am on time. Punctuality, he said, a trace of approval in his tone. Good. Most people who enter this house forget it is still a place of business. She frowned. Is that what this marriage is? A business arrangement? It is exactly that, Ethan replied evenly. And like every arrangement, it comes with rules. He handed her a folded paper. 5 lines, typed and signed. Lena read each one aloud, her voice steady. Rule number 1. Respect privacy. Rule number 2. No interference with company affairs. Rule number 3. No media engagement without approval. Rule number 4. Attend social events as required. Rule number 5. Maintain the image of a genuine marriage. She looked up. What happens if I break a rule? He met her eyes without flinching. Then the contract ends, and so do my obligations. Lena folded the paper slowly and placed it on the table. Understood, Mr. Cole. He studied her face for a moment before saying quietly, In this house, it is Ethan. She gave a small nod, but the name stayed heavy on her tongue. That evening, the staff gathered briefly to meet her. There were polite smiles, curious glances, and the faint hum of whispers once she passed. The head housekeeper, Mrs. Dalton, was kind but cautious. Dinner is served at 7, ma'am, she said. Mr. Cole prefers quiet meals. Lena smiled faintly. Then we already have something in common. When the clock struck 7, she entered the dining hall and nearly stopped in place. The table stretched longer than her old apartment, set with crystal glasses and silver cutlery that glowed under the chandelier. Ethan was already seated at one end, reading through a tablet, expression still and unreadable. She walked the long path to the opposite end and sat down. The silence between them was thick enough to touch. After a few minutes, Ethan looked up. Is the food not to your liking? It is fine, she said, cutting into the salmon carefully. Just quieter than I expected. He set the tablet aside. You are not required to make conversation. Lena's fork paused. You say that like it is a relief. A faint smirk crossed his lips. For most people it is. She leaned back slightly, her tone cool but measured. I am not most people. Their eyes met, and for a moment the air seemed to shift. The only sound was the soft clink of silverware and the echo of rain beginning to fall outside. After dinner, Ethan stood. Tomorrow evening, there is a charity gala at the Metropolitan Hall. You will accompany me. A car will pick you up at 6. She raised an eyebrow. Am I supposed to smile and pretend we are in love? That, he said, is part of the image. She exhaled through a small laugh. Right, the perfect wife, the perfect husband. Ethan's tone softened, just slightly. Appearances are currency in my world, Lena. Play the role, and no one will question you. Then, she met his gaze again, voice quiet but firm. Do not worry, Ethan. I have been pretending most of my life. He watched her leave the room, the sound of her footsteps fading down the hall. For a man who prided himself on control, her composure unsettled him. She carried herself not like a woman bought by convenience, but like someone who had nothing left to lose. Later that night, Lena explored the mansion's endless corridors. Each room looked untouched, each painting chosen for show rather than memory. In the library, she stopped before a portrait, a younger Ethan standing beside an older man. Both wore the same guarded expression. A small brass plaque read Charles Cole, founder of Cole Industries. Mrs. Dalton appeared at the doorway. That was his father, she said quietly. Passed away 3 years ago. Mr. Cole was different before then. He laughs less now. Lena turned toward her. He does not seem the laughing type. Once maybe, the older woman replied, then excused herself. Lena traced the frame with her fingertips. Once, maybe, she repeated under her breath. When she finally returned to her room, she noticed a fresh vase of lilies on the dresser and a note placed beside it. For tonight, consider it a welcome, not an apology. Signed with Ethan's initials. She stared at the paper, unsure whether to smile or tear it apart. The gesture was small, but it carried something she could not name. Outside, the rain thickened, tapping against the glass. In the far wing of the mansion, Ethan stood alone in his office, staring at the same storm. He told himself it was only business, only image, but deep down, he knew what that small act meant. For the first time since his father's death, Ethan Cole had allowed a stranger into his house and into the quiet he had built around himself. Neither of them slept well that night. The storm outside had nothing on the one quietly forming between them. The next morning, sunlight broke through the storm clouds, streaming across the polished floors of the Cole mansion. The rain had washed the gardens clean, leaving droplets glistening on every rose and pane of glass. Lena Hart stood by her bedroom window, a cup of coffee cooling in her hand. Somewhere in the house, the faint ticking of a clock echoed through the halls. The silence was almost unnerving. She had been there for 3 days. Every room was more beautiful than the last, but none of them felt lived in. The staff moved quietly, polite, but distant. Whenever she entered a room, conversation stopped, as if she had stepped into a world that did not yet know what to do with her. She put down her cup and looked at her reflection in the mirror. The simple dress she wore contrasted sharply with the luxury surrounding her. The silver wedding band on her finger caught the light, a cold reminder that this place, this life, was not hers. Downstairs, Mrs. Dalton appeared in the doorway. "Breakfast is ready, ma'am. Mr. Cole asked that you join him in the garden." Lena hesitated. "Does he always eat outside?" "Only when the weather allows, Mrs." Dalton said with a faint smile. "He likes control over everything, even the view." Lena followed her through a corridor that opened onto a glass terrace overlooking the river. The table was already set. Ethan Cole sat at the far end, reading the morning paper, his expression calm and unreadable. "Good morning," she said, taking her seat opposite him. He glanced up briefly. "Morning." For a moment, neither spoke. The sound of water lapping against the stone steps below filled the silence. Then Ethan folded the newspaper and placed it aside. "You have interviews this week." Lena frowned. "Interviews?" "For the charity gala," he said. "Reporters will ask about our marriage. They will expect you to answer with grace, confidence, and the illusion of love." She gave a dry laugh. "You mean lie." "I mean act," he replied evenly. "You have done that well so far." Her fork paused over her plate. "If you think this performance matters to me, you are wrong. I am not part of your world, Ethan. I do not care what your investors think." He leaned back slightly, his gaze steady. "You should care, because as long as you wear that ring, my world is yours too." Lena looked away, jaw tightening. "Then maybe your world needs more truth." They ate in silence after that, each word between them sharpened by unspoken challenge. When breakfast ended, Ethan stood. "The driver will take you to the boutique at 2 o'clock. My assistant will meet you there. You will need a gown for the gala." "I can choose my own clothes," Lena said quietly. "I have no doubt you can," Ethan replied. "But the media does not forgive imperfection. Consider this preparation, not control." He left her there, his words hanging like smoke in the morning air. At precisely 2 o'clock, the black car arrived. The boutique was unlike anything Lena had seen: soft lights, velvet curtains, rows of gowns that shimmered like water. Patricia Ward, Ethan's assistant, greeted her with a polite but genuine smile. "Mrs. Cole," she said, extending a hand. "I am glad you came. Mr. Cole wanted you to have options." Lena managed a faint smile. "I suppose he did." Patricia led her to a fitting room where dresses hung in shades of silver, navy, and gold. "He said to choose whichever makes you feel powerful." Lena ran her fingers over the fabrics. "That is surprising. He does not strike me as someone who cares about what makes others feel powerful." Patricia hesitated before answering. "He used to, before his father passed." The air went still. Lena turned. "What happened?" "Mr. Charles Cole built the company from nothing," Patricia said softly. "When he died, Ethan took over. But the board never believed he could lead with heart the way his father did. That is why he protects everything with rules. It is easier than losing again." Lena looked down at the gown in her hands, a deep green that shimmered like the river at sunset. "He hides behind structure." Patricia nodded. "Exactly. You might be the first person who sees through it." That evening, as the sun dipped low, Lena stood before her mirror in the chosen gown. The reflection startled her, graceful, composed, almost regal. Yet her eyes still held the same defiance that had carried her through every storm. Downstairs, Ethan waited by the door, dressed in a black tuxedo. When he saw her, his words caught for just a moment before he masked it. "You clean up well," he said. "So do you," she replied lightly, though something about the way he looked at her made her pulse quicken. They stepped into the waiting car. The city lights rose to meet them as the car moved through the streets, glass towers reflecting the golden glow of evening. Inside the quiet car, Ethan adjusted his cufflinks. When we arrive, remember confidence, not conversation. You do not have to impress anyone. You just have to look untouchable. Lena smiled faintly. Do you give all your employees this speech? You are not an employee, he said, glancing at her. You are my wife, remember? The words hung in the air, heavier than either of them expected. For the rest of the drive, neither spoke. But as the car turned toward the glittering lights of the Metropolitan Hall, both of them understood one thing clearly. Whatever this was between them, it was no longer just a contract. Somewhere between the rules and the silence, the first threads of something real had begun to pull at the walls they had both built. The evening of the gala arrived with the hum of luxury cars, flashes of cameras, and the faint echo of violin music spilling from the grand entrance of the Metropolitan Hall. Ethan Cole stepped out of the sleek black sedan first, his presence calm and commanding. The world seemed to pause when he turned to offer his hand to Lena Hart. She hesitated for half a heartbeat before taking it. The cameras went wild. The woman who had once balanced a tray in the shadows of a ballroom now stood beneath a canopy of lights, her emerald gown glimmering against the marble steps. Every head turned as the press shouted their questions. Mr. Cole, is it true your marriage was arranged? Mrs. Cole, how does it feel to be the wife of one of New York's most eligible millionaires? Lena kept her gaze forward, her hand steady in his. Smile, Ethan murmured under his breath. She did small, controlled, perfect. The flashbulbs fired like lightning, freezing the moment forever. Inside the grand hall, chandeliers blazed above a sea of black suits and sparkling gowns. A string quartet played softly as waiters weaved through the crowd with trays of champagne. Ethan's world was one of precision, every gesture rehearsed, every glance calculated. But tonight, he found himself distracted. Every time Lena moved, the light seemed to follow her. She greeted the other guests with poise that surprised even him. When one of the older investors, Mr. Greaves, smirked and said, "So this is the woman who tamed the great Ethan Cole." Lena smiled sweetly and replied, "I would not say tamed, sir. Just reintroduced him to the concept of manners." The group burst into laughter. Ethan felt a flicker of pride he did not expect. As the evening went on, the speeches began. Ethan took the stage to present a check for the Cole Foundation, his voice smooth, confident. Lena stood near the back, her hands clasped in front of her, watching him speak about integrity, perseverance, and the value of second chances. She wondered if he believed those words, or if they were just another performance. When he returned to her side, she whispered, "You sound like a man who has never made a mistake." He glanced at her, a hint of a smile at the corner of his mouth. "I have made plenty. I just do not announce them with a microphone." Before she could answer, a familiar voice broke through the chatter. "Ethan?" A tall, impeccably dressed man approached, the same sharp jawline, the same pale eyes. Ethan's expression changed instantly. "Nathan," he said, his tone flat. Lena sensed the tension. The man extended a hand to her. "Nathan Cole, cousin, you must be the new Mrs. Cole." Quite the surprise to the family. Lena shook his hand politely. "Nice to meet you." Nathan's smile did not reach his eyes. "Is it? I hope you know what you have gotten yourself into." Ethan has a habit of collecting things he cannot keep. "Enough," Ethan said quietly, his voice edged with steel. Nathan chuckled. "Relax, cousin. I am just saying hello. You should enjoy the night. After all, these headlines will not last forever." He turned and walked away, leaving the faint trace of perfume and arrogance in his wake. Lena looked up at Ethan. "He does not like you much." "Family rarely does when money is involved," Ethan said, his jaw tightening. She hesitated. "He seemed to know something." "About us." "He knows nothing," Ethan replied too quickly, and for the first time, Lena noticed the shadow behind his composure. The rest of the evening blurred into polite conversations and polite smiles. But the words lingered like smoke. Things he cannot keep. When they finally returned to the mansion past midnight, the house was silent except for the rain beginning to fall again. Lena removed her heels and set them by the door, her feet aching. Ethan loosened his tie, walking toward the study. "You handled yourself well tonight," he said without turning. "Thank you," she replied softly. It almost felt real. He paused in the doorway. It was real enough for the cameras. That is all that matters. Her voice was calm, but the words carried weight. Maybe not for everyone. He looked back, eyes unreadable. What do you mean? Nothing, she said, walking past him toward the stairs. Good night, Ethan. He watched her disappear down the hall. For a long moment, he stood there in silence, the echo of her footsteps mixing with the soft rhythm of rain against glass. In her room, Lena sat on the edge of the bed, still in her gown. The night replayed in fragments Nathan's smirk, Ethan's speech, the weight of the cameras. She traced the silver ring on her finger. It was just metal, but tonight, it had felt heavier than ever. In his office, Ethan poured a glass of water, but he did not drink it. Instead, he opened a drawer and pulled out an old photograph. It showed him as a boy beside his father in front of the Cole Foundation building. His father's handwritten words were scrawled across the bottom. A man's worth is not measured by what he owns, but by who he stands beside. Oh. Ethan stared at it for a long time, the rain blurring the view outside. Somewhere deep down, he knew he had built walls high enough to keep the world out. But now, for the first time, someone had walked through the door without asking for permission, and he was not sure whether that terrified or comforted him. The next morning dawned clear and quiet, as if the city itself had paused to breathe after the storm of cameras and whispers from the night before. The Cole mansion stood still under a pale blue sky, its stone walls glowing softly in the light. Inside, the household was already alive with motion staff setting the table, fresh flowers being arranged, and Mrs. Dalton directing the morning routine with her usual calm precision. Lena Hart awoke to the faint smell of coffee drifting through the hall. For a few seconds, she forgot where she was. The bed was too soft, the ceiling too high. Then she saw the folded newspaper on her nightstand with a headline in bold letters. Ethan Cole and his mysterious wife steal the spotlight at charity gala. Her photograph filled the front page, smiling, graceful, radiant under the chandelier light. She set it aside with a sigh. The article made it sound like a fairy tale, but she knew what it had really been, a test. Every look, every touch, every smile had been part of a performance that neither of them had rehearsed, but somehow both understood. When she came downstairs, Ethan was already at the table. His suit jacket was off, his sleeves rolled neatly to his elbows. He looked up from his tablet and gestured toward the chair opposite him. "You made the morning papers," he said. "I noticed," she replied, taking her seat. "Apparently I smiled at you like a woman in love." Ethan looked faintly amused. "That is exactly what they needed to see." "And what about what I needed to see?" He met her gaze unflinching. "You signed a contract, Lena. You already know what this is." She took a sip of coffee, her voice even. "Yes, I do. But you keep acting as if this arrangement protects you. Maybe it protects me, too." That made him pause. For a moment, something unspoken flickered in his eyes, but before he could answer, Patricia Ward appeared in the doorway. "Mr. Cole, the board meeting has been moved to 10. Nathan Cole will be joining via video call." Ethan's expression tightened. "Of course he will." Patricia gave a sympathetic glance toward Lena. "Good morning, Mrs. Cole." "Good morning," Lena said softly. When Patricia left, Ethan stood, slipping back into the armor of professionalism that seemed to define him. "I will be gone most of the day. Mrs. Dalton will assist you if you need anything." "Oh, I do not need anything," Lena said, rising as well. "But thank you." He hesitated for a heartbeat, as if wanting to say something more, but then simply nodded and left. Later that afternoon, the mansion felt almost empty. Lena wandered through the long corridors, the sound of her footsteps echoing softly. She stopped by the library again, the same room where she had first seen the portrait of Ethan and his father. Sunlight filtered through tall windows, painting the room in gold and shadow. She sat in one of the armchairs, running her fingers along the spines of books. They were arranged perfectly, too perfectly. Not a single page seemed touched. "Ma'am?" "Mrs." Dalton's voice came from the doorway. "Would you like some tea?" "Yes, please," Lena said. As the housekeeper set down the tray, she hesitated. "If I may say so, Mrs. Cole, you handled yourself beautifully last night. The staff could not stop talking about how elegant you looked." Lena smiled faintly. "Thank you, but it was just an act." Mrs. Dalton poured the tea carefully. "Sometimes acts show us who we really are, dear, even if they start as pretend." When the older woman left, Lena stared at the steam rising from her cup. She thought about the way Ethan had looked at her when she had spoken to his cousin, the faint edge of protectiveness in his voice. It was not love, but it was something close to respect. By evening, Ethan returned. The sound of his car tires on the gravel drive echoed through the quiet estate. When he entered, his tie was loosened, his face drawn from a long day. He stopped when he saw her sitting by the fireplace, reading. "You look different when you are not trying to win an argument," he said lightly. She closed the book. "And you look tired when you are not trying to win the world." That earned a small, genuine smile from him. "Touché." He poured himself a glass of water and sat across from her. For a few moments, they sat in companionable silence, the crackle of the fire filling the space between them. Finally, Ethan spoke. "Nathan made a scene during the board meeting. He questioned my leadership. He hinted that our marriage was a publicity stunt." Lena tilted her head. "And what did you tell them?" "I told them it was real," he said. His tone was calm, but his eyes revealed the truth. He was tired of fighting to prove himself to everyone. Lena studied him quietly. "Do you ever get tired of pretending?" "Every day," he admitted, his voice low. "But it is the only way to survive in my world." She nodded slowly. "Maybe you do not have to survive alone." Ethan looked at her, something uncertain flickering in his expression. "You think we are on the same side now?" "I think," she said softly, "we could be." End quote. The air between them grew still. For a long moment, neither spoke. The firelight played across his face, softening the sharp edges. He looked at her not as a business arrangement, but as a person, someone who had seen him without judgment. "Finally," he said, "the gala next week will be at the governor's mansion. It is a big one. You will need another dress." Lena smiled slightly. "Maybe this time, I will choose it myself." "I would expect nothing less," he replied. As he stood to leave, Lena called after him. "Ethan?" He turned. "Thank you for telling them it was real." He gave a small nod before walking out, but his steps slowed just slightly. When she was alone again, Lena touched the ring on her finger. For the first time, it did not feel like a chain. Upstairs, in his study, Ethan stood by the window, looking out at the river. He told himself that everything between them was still under control. Yet somewhere beneath the calm surface, he knew control was the one thing he was beginning to lose. The days that followed settled into an uneasy rhythm. Ethan Cole spent most mornings at the coal industry's headquarters, while Lena Hart stayed at the mansion, learning the quiet language of a house that ran like a clock. Each day started the same coffee served precisely at 7, meetings lined up by the hour, and the faint hum of business phone calls echoing through the marble halls. Yet, beneath that order, something warmer began to take root. It started small, a conversation that lasted longer than it should have. A shared look across the breakfast table that lingered a second too long. The walls between them were still there, but they had begun to crack. One afternoon, Ethan returned home earlier than usual. Lena was in the garden, kneeling by the rose bushes, her hair tied loosely behind her neck. The scent of fresh soil and blooming flowers filled the air. He watched her for a moment before speaking. "You do not strike me as someone who likes silence," he said. She looked up, brushing dirt from her hands. "And you do not strike me as someone who leaves the office before sunset." He smiled faintly. "Maybe we are both breaking character." Lena stood, squinting against the light. "You could try it more often. The world will not collapse if you leave work early." He looked at her, amused. "You would be surprised how close it comes." "Othered." She shook her head. "Then maybe you need better foundations." Ethan studied her face for a moment, the sunlight catching in her eyes. "You sound like my father," he said softly. "He used to tell me that." Lena hesitated. "He must have been a good man." "He was," Ethan said quietly. "Too good. That is why the board never forgave me for not being him." She took a step closer. "You do not have to be him, Ethan. You just have to be decent." He looked away, his expression unreadable. "Decency does not keep companies alive, Lena." "Maybe not," she said. "But it keeps people alive." For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Ethan said, "You should change. We have a dinner tonight. It is not a gala, just a business event. A few investors, some partners. You will not need to pretend too much." "Do I have a choice?" He gave a small smile. "Not really." That evening, the dinner was held at the Cole Tower's private rooftop restaurant. The view stretched across Manhattan, a sea of light and glass shimmering beneath the night sky. The tables were dressed in white linen, the air filled with the sound of clinking glasses and quiet laughter. When Lena entered, conversation paused for half a second. Every head turned. She wore a simple navy gown, her hair pulled back elegantly, her presence calm but confident. Ethan, in his tailored suit, greeted her with a polite nod as though she were another guest. Throughout dinner, he introduced her to the investors, speaking with his usual composure. Lena played her part flawlessly, graceful, intelligent, unshaken. Yet every time she caught Ethan's eye, there was something unspoken there. Midway through the meal, one of the older guests, Mr. Halden, leaned forward with a smirk. "So, Mrs. Cole, how does it feel to be married to the most stubborn man in New York?" Lena smiled, her tone light but pointed. "I would not say stubborn, more like selectively flexible." The table laughed, and Ethan's lips curved almost imperceptibly. "Careful," he said under his breath. "You are starting to sound like my equal." She looked at him evenly. "Maybe I am." After dessert, the guests moved to the terrace to enjoy the skyline. The night air was cool, carrying the faint hum of the city below. Lena stepped aside, leaning on the railing. Ethan joined her after a moment, his expression softer now that they were alone. "You did well tonight," he said. "They like you." "That is good for business, right?" she said. "Yes," he admitted. "But that is not why I am saying it." Lena turned to him, her voice quiet. "Then why are you saying it?" Ethan looked at her, and for once, there was no calculation in his eyes. "Because I meant it." The silence between them deepened, filled only by the city's heartbeat far below. She looked back at the skyline. "You know, when I was a kid, I used to think people in those towers had everything figured out. Turns out they are just as lost as the rest of us." He smiled faintly. "More, maybe." They stood side by side, neither daring to name what was shifting between them. For the first time there was no contract, no performance, only a fragile moment of honesty. Then Ethan's phone buzzed. The screen lit up with a name that made his expression harden instantly. Nathan Cole. He silenced it without answering, but the spell had already broken. Lena noticed. "You could have picked up." "I will deal with him later," Ethan said flatly. "Maybe avoiding him makes you look guilty," she said. "Maybe," he replied. "But I am used to being misunderstood." She looked at him for a moment longer. "You do not have to be." "Oh?" He turned toward her, and for the first time, his voice dropped to something almost vulnerable. "You keep saying that as if it were easy." She smiled softly. "Nothing worth having ever is." Ethan did not answer. Instead, he simply nodded and looked back out over the city. The lights flickered like stars, and in that brief silence, both of them understood something they could not yet admit aloud. They had begun as a dare, a contract, a game of power and pride, but somewhere along the way, it had started to feel like something real, something dangerous. Neither of them was ready to call it love, but both knew that whatever it was, it had already changed them forever. The next morning unfolded with a rare quiet. The sun cast soft light through the tall windows of the Cole mansion, stretching golden stripes across the marble floor. The city beyond was waking up, but inside the house, time seemed slower. Lena Hart woke before the staff began their routine. She walked through the hallway barefoot, her steps silent against the cool floor. In the kitchen, she found Mrs. Dalton already preparing breakfast. The older woman looked up in surprise. "You are up early, ma'am." "I could not sleep," Lena admitted with a small smile. "I thought I would help." Mrs. Dalton chuckled softly. "This house has seen many things, Mrs. Cole, but never a lady of the house cooking breakfast." Lena shrugged lightly. "Then maybe it is time it does." The smell of pancakes and coffee soon filled the air. By the time Ethan appeared, still in his white shirt with the top buttons undone, the table looked like something out of a magazine. He paused at the doorway. "Did I miss a national holiday?" She smirked. "No. Just breakfast that does not come with a board meeting." He pulled out a chair, sitting down slowly. "You cooked this?" "With Mrs. Dalton's help," Lena said. "I thought maybe this place could use a little less silence." Ethan picked up a fork, tasting one of the pancakes. "It is good," he said, almost surprised. Lena crossed her arms, amused. "Do not sound so shocked. I ran a bookstore, remember?" Cooking was how I survived slow days. He leaned back slightly, studying her. I forget sometimes that you had a life before this. She met his eyes evenly. And you had one before you turned into a headline. The corner of his mouth lifted. Fair point. For a few moments, they ate quietly, the tension between them replaced by something gentler. Outside, the sound of birds drifted in through the open window. After breakfast, Ethan pushed his chair back. I have meetings until evening. The board is still nervous after Nathan's questions last week. Lena frowned. What kind of questions? The kind that make investors wonder if I am capable of running my own company, he said, voice clipped. He thinks this marriage is a distraction. A weakness. She tilted her head. Is it? Ethan hesitated. Not in the way he thinks. Their eyes met again. There was no pretense this time. Only understanding. That afternoon, while Ethan was away, Lena received an unexpected visitor. Patricia Ward arrived with a small team carrying boxes wrapped in silk. Mr. Cole asked me to deliver these, she said, setting them on the bed. Lena raised an eyebrow. More dresses? Not exactly. Tonight's event is at the governor's mansion. He thought you might prefer options. Lena opened one of the boxes. Inside lay a white gown with intricate silver embroidery along the sleeves. Elegant, timeless, far too beautiful for someone pretending. Patricia hesitated. May I say something, Mrs. Cole? Of course. I have worked for Mr. Cole for 8 years, Patricia said quietly. I have never seen him care about appearances this much. Not even when the company was under review. But you have changed the tone of this house. Of him. Lena smiled faintly. He would say it is just good business. Maybe, Patricia said, returning the smile. But some things are too human to be business. When Patricia left, Lena sat on the edge of the bed, fingers brushing over the soft fabric. She did not know what scared her more, that Ethan might feel something real, or that she might. That evening, they arrived at the governor's mansion together. The marble staircase glowed under chandeliers, and the scent of perfume and polished oak filled the air. Reporters were kept at a distance this time. It was an event for the elite politicians, CEOs, and the city's most powerful families. Ethan guided her through the crowd, every gesture careful, measured. But there was a subtle difference tonight. His hand lingered at her back just long enough to be noticed. Governor Hayes, an old friend of Ethan's father, approached with a wide smile. Ethan Cole, it has been too long, and this must be your wife. I have heard plenty about you, young lady. All good things, I hope, Lena said politely. The governor laughed. For now. But you know how this city works. Good things do not sell papers. As they talked, Ethan's cousin Nathan appeared again, uninvited as always. Cousin, Nathan said smoothly, raising a glass. And Mrs. Cole. What a surprise to see you here. Still playing the happy couple, I see. Ethan's expression turned cold. Nathan, this is not the place. Oh, but it is, Nathan replied. Investors love stories. And this one, well, it is my favorite. The Cinderella marriage that keeps the tabloids alive. Lena's voice was calm, steady. You seem very interested in something you claim not to believe in. Nathan's smirk faltered, just for a moment. Careful, Mrs. Cole. The higher you stand beside him, the further you will fall when he lets go. Ethan stepped forward, his voice low but firm. Enough. Nathan raised his hands in mock surrender. Relax, cousin. I am just making conversation. He walked away, leaving tension in his wake. Lena turned to Ethan. He hates you. He hates losing, Ethan said. To you? To anyone, Ethan replied quietly. Especially to me. The rest of the evening passed under the weight of that encounter. When they returned home, the mansion felt heavier than usual. Ethan loosened his tie, running a hand through his hair. I am sorry about him, he said finally. You do not need to apologize for someone else's bitterness, Lena said softly. But maybe you should stop letting it shape who you are. He looked at her for a long time before saying, I do not know how. Then maybe that is what I am here for, she replied. Ethan's voice dropped. You were supposed to be my greatest mistake. Oh, Lena's eyes softened. Maybe I still am. Or maybe I am the lesson you needed. Neither of them spoke after that. But in the quiet that followed, something unspoken settled between them, an understanding deeper than any contract could define. For the first time, the mansion no longer felt like a prison. It felt like the beginning of something fragile, unpredictable, and real. The next few days unfolded under a strange calm, like the air before a storm. On the surface, life inside the Cole mansion continued, as usual business calls, breakfast at 7, polite conversations that hid more than they revealed. Yet beneath that order, tension hummed quietly, steady and sharp. Ethan Cole had become more distant since the night of the governor's event. He worked longer hours, returning home long after midnight. When he did, his tone was polite but guarded, as though he feared that one honest word might undo everything he had built. Lena Hart felt the change before she understood it. At first, she told herself it was just work. That was what powerful men did. They disappeared into their empires. But as the days passed, small signs began to surface. A canceled dinner, a sudden press leak about internal issues at Cole Industries, whispers in the media that someone within the company was feeding stories to the press. One morning, Lena found Ethan in his office, pacing in front of the large window overlooking the city. His usually calm expression had been replaced by something she had never seen before, anger mixed with exhaustion. "You were up early," she said softly. He looked up, startled for a moment before his tone turned businesslike. "There is a problem. Someone has been leaking documents from the board meetings, financial records, private memos." "Do you know who?" she asked. He shook his head. "Not yet, but I have a guess." Lena frowned. "Nathan." Ethan nodded. "He has always wanted to take the company. He is using this marriage as his weapon. The tabloids are calling me reckless, unfit to lead." She walked closer. "And what are you going to do about it?" "What I always do," he said sharply. "Fix it." Lena crossed her arms. "By fighting him on his terms, or by finally trusting someone who is not paid to agree with you?" He looked at her, his voice lower now. "Trust has never worked out well for me, Lena. Maybe because you only give it to people who see you as a title, not as a person," she said quietly. Her words hung in the air, heavier than either of them expected. For a moment, Ethan looked as if he wanted to argue. But instead, he turned away. "I have a meeting with the auditors. It will be a long day." When he left, the house felt colder than before. That afternoon, while walking through the garden, Lena's phone buzzed. The caller ID showed a number she did not recognize. She answered cautiously. "Hello?" A familiar voice responded. "Mrs. Cole, this is Nathan." Her grip tightened around the phone. "How did you get my number?" "Relax," he said smoothly. "I am not calling to threaten you. I am calling to warn you. Your husband is losing control of the company, and when he falls, he will take you with him." Lena's tone hardened. "You underestimate him." "Do I?" Nathan replied. "You think you know him, but you do not. He built his empire on pride, and pride always cracks first. Ask yourself, do you really know why he married you? Or was it just another deal on paper?" Her breath caught. "Whatever game you are playing, it will not work." Nathan's voice turned soft, almost pitying. "You sound just like his father used to. Blind faith, no armor. Be careful, Mrs. Cole. In this family, loyalty is a currency, and yours is running out." The line went dead before she could respond. Lena stood there for a long time, the phone still in her hand, the breeze tugging at her hair. She knew Nathan's words were meant to divide them, but something inside her twisted anyway. Did she really know why Ethan had chosen her? That night, when Ethan returned, he found her waiting in the study. The lights were low, and the fire cast flickering shadows across the room. "You are home early," he said carefully. "We need to talk," she replied. He sighed, setting his briefcase aside. "That phrase never means anything good." She stepped closer. "Nathan called me." His expression changed instantly. "He what?" "He said you are losing control of the company, that everything between us was just another deal to save your reputation." Ethan's jaw tightened. "You should not have answered him." "I did not know it was him," she said, "but you did not deny it." He ran a hand through his hair. "Because it is complicated." "Then simplify it," Lena said, her voice firm. "Tell me the truth. Why me? Why this marriage?" For a long time, he said nothing. Then he looked at her, his voice low but steady. "Because I needed someone who did not want anything from me. Someone I could trust to stand beside me when everything else was falling apart. It started as a dare. Yes, but you stayed because you had every reason to leave, and you did not." Her eyes softened, though her tone remained guarded. You talk about trust, but you still treat me like an outsider. He exhaled slowly. Because if I start seeing you as more than that, I will lose control. She took a step closer. Maybe control is not what you need, Ethan. Maybe it is honesty. Their eyes met, the space between them heavy with all the things neither had dared to say. The sound of rain began against the window, slow and rhythmic. Finally, Ethan spoke again, his voice barely above a whisper. I am not my father. I do not know how to love without turning it into a contract. Lena's expression softened. Then maybe it is time you learned. The room fell into silence. The storm outside grew stronger, wind rattling the glass. Ethan stood motionless, his defenses lowering for the briefest moment. For the first time, he realized that the woman standing in front of him was not the weakness Nathan claimed she was. She was the only part of his life that felt real. And that terrified him more than losing everything else. The following week arrived with more headlines and whispers than either of them could count. Every major business column carried the same tone of speculation. Coal industries faces internal unrest. Rumors surround Ethan Cole's marriage and company stability. The mansion, once a sanctuary from the noise, now felt surrounded by invisible cameras and questions. Lena Hart read one of the newspapers at breakfast, the ink smudging slightly on her fingers. Across the table, Ethan Cole was silent, his expression carved from stone. The smell of coffee filled the air, but neither touched their cups. They are saying you are being investigated, Lena said quietly. They say whatever sells, Ethan replied, his voice calm but hollow. There is no investigation. Not yet. Not yet, she repeated. That means there could be one. Ethan looked up, meeting her gaze. Nathan's making sure of it. He is feeding stories to the press, stirring up doubt. He wants shareholders to panic. And it is working, she said. He gave a short, humorless laugh. Of course it is. Scandal is currency. Lena folded the newspaper and set it aside. Then fight him with the truth. He shook his head. Truth does not sell. Control does. And right now, I am losing both. For a long moment, they sat in silence, the air between them heavy. Then Ethan stood abruptly, gathering his things. I have a board meeting. Do not leave the house today. Reporters have been camped outside since dawn. Lena's tone softened. Ethan, you cannot keep running from this. He paused at the doorway, his voice low. I am not running. I am managing fallout. There is a difference. When he was gone, the silence that followed felt like a weight pressing down on the walls. By noon, the mansion's front gates were crowded with reporters, their cameras flashing every time a curtain moved. Lena watched from the upstairs window, her reflection overlapping the chaos below. She had never asked for this kind of attention. Every flash of light felt like a reminder that her life was no longer her own. A knock came at the door. Mrs. Dalton stepped inside, her face pale. Ma'am, someone left an envelope for you. No one saw who. Lena frowned, taking the envelope. It had no name, no address, just her initials written in bold black ink. She opened it carefully. Inside was a single photograph. It showed Ethan standing beside a woman outside a hotel. The woman's face was turned toward him, smiling. Beneath the photo were printed words. Your perfect husband still knows how to play the game. Lena's chest tightened. She stared at the picture for several seconds before setting it down. Where did this come from? Mrs. Dalton shook her head. The guard found it at the gate. Thank you, Lena said quietly. When the housekeeper left, Lena sat on the edge of the bed, the photo trembling in her hands. Every rational part of her mind told her it was manipulation. Nathan's tactic, another strike to divide them, but the image gnawed at her anyway. She spent the afternoon pacing the room, replaying their last conversation. I am not my father. I do not know how to love without turning it into a contract. The honesty in his voice had felt real, yet now she questioned everything. By evening, Ethan returned. The moment he walked through the door, she saw the exhaustion in his eyes. He loosened his tie and noticed the photo lying on the table. He froze. Where did you get that? He asked, his tone sharp. It was delivered here, Lena said, crossing her arms. Someone wanted to make sure I saw it. He picked up the photo, his jaw tightening. Nathan. Lena's voice trembled, though she tried to keep it steady. Is it true? Ethan looked up, his expression a mixture of anger and disbelief. No. The woman in that picture is a consultant. We met in public, in broad daylight. But I can already guess how it looks out of context. Then why did you not tell me you met her? Because I do not report my every meeting, he said. And because I did not think you would need to know. Her eyes darkened. That is the problem, Ethan. You decide what I need to know. You decide what is real. He exhaled slowly. Lena, listen to me. This is exactly what Nathan wants. He knows you are the only part of my life I cannot control, and he is using that. She shook her head. Do not turn this into another business analogy. I am not one of your shareholders. I am your wife, even if only on paper. His voice dropped, quiet but strained. You are more than that. She looked at him, eyes glistening. Then start treating me like it. Lo. For a moment, the silence between them felt louder than shouting. Then Ethan spoke again, his tone lower now, almost pleading. You think I do not care, but I do. I just do not know how to show it without losing everything else. Lena took a deep breath. Maybe what you are trying to save is not worth the cost. He did not answer. His shoulders sank slightly, as though the weight of the world had finally caught up to him. When he left the room, the door closed softly behind him. Lena sat in the stillness that followed, staring at the photograph again. This time, she saw past the image, the angle, the composition, the too perfect timing. It was a setup, carefully crafted. Her heart steadied. She would not let Nathan destroy what little truth she and Ethan had begun to build. Late that night, she walked quietly into Ethan's study. The lamp was still on, casting a soft glow over the desk scattered with papers. Ethan was asleep in the chair, his head resting against his hand, a half-written letter before him. She leaned closer and saw the unfinished words. For once, I want to believe someone will stay, even when the headlines fade. Lena stood there for a moment, the edges of her anger softening. She placed the photo on the desk, then covered it gently with the letter. Then give them something real to stay for, she whispered. The rain began to fall outside again, steady and relentless. Inside, for the first time in days, the house felt less like a fortress and more like a waiting heart. The next morning, the mansion was unusually still. The rain from the night before had cleared, leaving behind a sharp chill that hung in the air. Sunlight slipped through the high windows in thin gold lines, catching the dust as it danced slowly above the polished floor. Lena's heart woke with a heavy feeling in her chest. The events of the previous day replayed in her mind like a song she could not turn off. The photograph, the argument, the silence that followed. She went downstairs, expecting to find the dining room set as usual, but the long table was empty. Mrs. Dalton appeared a moment later, her hands folded neatly in front of her. Mr. Cole left early, she said quietly. He asked not to be disturbed until the evening. Lena hesitated. Did he say where he went? Mrs. Dalton shook her head. Only that he had something to fix. Lena forced a small smile. He is always fixing something. She sat alone at the table, sipping coffee that had already gone cold. Outside, the reporters had not moved from the gate. Their distant voices drifted in through the glass, fragments of speculation carried by the wind. After breakfast, Lena walked through the empty halls. The house felt larger than ever, echoing with the absence of the man who had built walls around his life, and then, somehow, let her inside. She found herself in the library again, standing before the portrait of Ethan and his father. You would have known what to do, she whispered to the painted eyes of Charles Cole. He is trying, but he does not know how. Her phone buzzed suddenly. It was Patricia Ward. Mrs. Cole. Patricia's voice sounded rushed, uneasy. You need to know something before it hits the press. Someone leaked a recording from last night's board meeting. Lena straightened. What kind of recording? A conversation between Ethan and Nathan. It makes it sound like the marriage was staged to distract from the company's financial losses. It is already spreading online. Lena felt her pulse quicken. That is not true. I know, Patricia said. But the damage will be real. Investors are panicking. Ethan left early this morning to try to contain it. Where is he? At the headquarters. But please, Mrs. Cole, do not go there now. The building is surrounded by reporters. Lena ended the call, her mind racing. She looked again at the portrait, at the man whose name still carried weight across the city. Then she whispered to herself, If he will not defend the truth, I will. By noon, Lena stepped out of the mansion and into the waiting storm of cameras. The reporters surged forward, microphones flashing. Mrs. Cole, is it true your marriage is fake? Did your husband pay you to protect his image? Are you aware of the recording between Ethan and Nathan Cole? Lena took a deep breath. Her voice was calm, steady. My marriage is real. Maybe it did not start that way, but it became real when we both stopped pretending. My husband is not perfect, but he is not a liar. The people spreading these stories are the ones afraid of his honesty. Her words hit the air like thunder. The crowd fell momentarily silent before exploding with more questions. She did not stay to answer them. Instead, she turned and walked toward the waiting car. Inside, her hands trembled slightly, but her expression remained firm. She called Patricia again. Tell Ethan I am coming to the office. He does not get to fight this alone. When Lena arrived at Cole Industries, the front steps were crowded with photographers. Security rushed to open a path for her, guiding her inside. The building buzzed with tension, employees whispering in corners, phones ringing nonstop, executives pacing the halls. Ethan was in the conference room, standing at the head of a long glass table. His tie was gone, his sleeves rolled up, and his expression was a storm barely contained. Half a dozen board members sat across from him, their voices raised. You lied to us, Ethan, one of them said sharply. You used a marriage to protect your reputation. Ethan's tone was cold but steady. I used nothing. The company was never in danger until Nathan began tearing it apart from the inside. Another voice cut in. The press does not care about the truth. They care about the scandal. At that moment, the door opened. Everyone turned. Lena stood in the doorway, calm but commanding. Then maybe it is time someone told them the truth, she said. Ethan froze. Lena, you should not be here. She ignored him and stepped forward. You all want a story? Here it is. He married me because he was too proud to admit that he could still believe in people. I said yes because I needed a reason to trust again. It started as a contract, yes, but somewhere between the signatures and the silence, we found something that was not written down. Integrity, loyalty, and the kind of courage that terrifies men who only care about power. The room was silent. Even the board members who had been shouting a moment ago looked stunned. Ethan stared at her, words caught somewhere between anger and awe. You should not have done this, he said quietly. Maybe not, she replied, but someone had to remind them who you are. The chairman cleared his throat. Mrs. Cole, with all due respect, this is a business matter. Lena turned toward him. No, this is a matter of character. And if character no longer matters in business, then this company has already lost more than its stock value. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then, slowly, the chairman nodded. We will reconvene later. Mr. Cole, Mrs. Cole, thank you for your time. The board members filed out one by one, leaving Ethan and Lena alone in the room. Ethan exhaled deeply, rubbing the back of his neck. You just told the entire board I married you for pride. She smiled faintly. You did, but I also told them what you have become since then. He looked at her, his voice softer now. You did not have to defend me. Yes, I did, she said simply, because you would have done the same for me. Oh. He stared at her for a long moment before saying quietly, You should not have to be this brave for me. Lena met his eyes. Then stop giving me reasons to be. Outside the glass walls, the storm of rumors was still raging. But inside that quiet room, for the first time in days, they stood on the same side again, no longer pretending, no longer hiding. Just two people learning what it truly meant to fight for something real. That evening, long after the boardroom emptied and the city lights flickered to life beyond the glass tower, Ethan Cole sat alone at his desk. The office that once symbolized power now felt like a cage of glass and silence. The words Lena had spoken in front of the board still echoed in his mind, sharp, honest, and undeservedly kind. He had built his life on precision and control, yet one woman's courage had just saved his name from collapsing under the weight of lies. The door opened quietly. Lena stepped in, still in the same white blouse and black skirt she had worn during the confrontation. Her hair was loose now, her expression calm but unreadable. You did not have to stay, Ethan said softly, without looking up. I did not stay for you, she replied. I stayed for the truth. He leaned back in his chair, his exhaustion showing. You made quite an impression today. Half the board will think you are reckless, and the other half will wish they had your courage. Lena walked to the window, her reflection merging with the city lights. I do not care what they think. I only care that Nathan does not win. Ethan's voice hardened at the name. He will not. I know what he is planning now. She turned to face him. What do you mean? I reviewed the company's internal accounts. Nathan has been funneling funds from the charity branch into a shell organization under his name. He used the scandal around our marriage to draw attention away from it. Lena's eyes widened. He is stealing from the foundation? Yes, Ethan said, his tone sharp. The same foundation my father built to help families like yours. That is why I started this fight. Not for the headlines, not for the company's stock, but for his legacy. Lena took a slow breath. Then we have to expose him. Ethan looked at her, a faint, tired smile forming. You are talking like a partner now. Maybe I am, she said. You said you could not trust people who wanted something from you. Well, I do not want your money. I just want to see the right person win. He studied her face, the honesty in her words softening something deep inside him. You are braver than anyone I have ever met. Lena's smile was small but genuine. Bravery is what you do when you run out of choices. By the next morning, Ethan and Lena had a plan. They gathered the financial records, tracing the false transactions that linked Nathan's offshore accounts to the stolen charity funds. Patricia helped compile everything into a single, undeniable file. Once we release this to the board and the press, Nathan will have no place left to hide, Ethan said, his voice calm but firm. Lena nodded. Then do it, before he finds another way to twist the story. But Ethan hesitated. If I go public with this, it will not just destroy him. It will destroy part of the company. People will lose faith in coal industries, and hundreds of employees could lose their jobs. Lena looked at him quietly. So what are you saying? That it is better to protect your image than to tell the truth? He shook his head. I am saying that justice comes with a cost, and I am trying to decide who pays it. She stepped closer, her voice steady. You once told me you built your company on control. Maybe it is time you build something on integrity instead. For a moment, he said nothing. Then he nodded slowly. You are right. My father would have done the same. That afternoon, Ethan called an emergency board meeting. The directors filed into the room, confused and restless. Nathan arrived last, his confident smile firmly in place. What is this about, cousin? Nathan asked, feigning innocence. Ethan stood at the head of the table, his posture straight, his expression unreadable. It is about the truth you have been hiding. He pressed a button on the projector remote. Numbers and documents appeared on the large screen transaction records, bank statements, email trails. Nathan's face paled as the evidence filled the room. This, Ethan said clearly, is proof that you have been diverting funds from the Coal Foundation into private accounts under your control. You used the media scandal to distract from it. The room erupted in shocked whispers. Nathan's mask slipped, his voice turning cold. You cannot prove those accounts are mine. Who? Ethan's tone remained calm. Actually, I can. They are registered under your holding company, one that traces back to your signature on the incorporation papers. I made sure the investigators verified every detail before this meeting. For the first time, Nathan faltered. His eyes darted between the directors, searching for support and finding none. Lena watched from the back of the room, her heart pounding. Ethan stood tall, composed, but his voice carried a quiet force that demanded belief. I made mistakes, he continued, but stealing from the foundation that bears our family name was never one of them, and I will not allow anyone, family or not, to turn our legacy into greed. Nathan's chair scraped sharply against the floor as he stood. You think this will save you? You think one act of moral theater will erase your failures? Ethan met his gaze. No, but it will show the world that I am not afraid to face them. Security entered the room as Nathan's protests grew louder. The directors voted unanimously to remove him from the board. By the time the guards escorted Nathan out, the air in the room had shifted from fear to quiet respect. When the meeting ended, Ethan walked toward Lena. She looked at him with a faint smile. You did it, He shook his head. We did it. She hesitated. What happens now? He looked out the window at the city skyline. Now I rebuild. This time, the right way. Lena's voice was soft but certain. Then maybe this was never about losing control. Maybe it was about finding it again. Ethan turned toward her, his eyes steady. You make that sound easy, she smiled. It never is, but it is worth it. No. For the first time in a long while, Ethan Cole felt something he could not explain, peace mixed with gratitude, and something deeper that he was not yet ready to name. The war inside the boardroom had ended, but he knew another battle had quietly begun, the one for his own heart. The following morning, the Cole mansion was brighter than it had been in weeks. For the first time in what felt like forever, the silence inside its walls did not carry tension but peace. The air was lighter, almost renewed. Ethan Cole stood by the window of his study, watching the river glisten under the early sunlight. The news had already broken across every major outlet. Nathan Cole removed from Cole Industries board after financial scandal. The story that had once painted Ethan as reckless now called him a man of integrity who had chosen truth over power. But Ethan was not thinking about the headlines. He was thinking about the woman who had walked into a boardroom full of doubters and spoken for him when he had stopped believing in himself. When Lena Hart entered the room, he turned instantly. She wore a simple gray sweater, her hair still damp from the morning shower. Her expression was calm, but distant. You did not sleep, she said softly. I could say the same for you, Ethan replied. She smiled faintly. You looked like you needed to win, and you did. Oh. He walked toward her, his tone quieter now. It does not feel like winning. It feels like beginning again. That sounds better, she said. Beginnings are honest, wins are temporary. He studied her face, then spoke carefully. You were right about everything. About trust. About truth. I would not have made it without you. Lena met his eyes, her voice steady. You would have. You just needed someone to remind you what you were fighting for. Ethan hesitated, his expression softening. Lena, Before he could finish, Patricia Ward appeared in the doorway. Mr. Cole, I am sorry to interrupt, but the press is requesting an official statement. They want you and Mrs. Cole to appear together. Lena blinked, surprised. Together? Patricia nodded. They want to see unity after everything that happened. It could restore complete confidence in the company. Ethan looked at Lena. Only if you are comfortable with it. She crossed her arms, thoughtful. If this helps clear your name, then yes. But only if we speak the truth, no rehearsed statements, no staged smiles. Ethan's mouth curved into a quiet smile. Deal. Later that afternoon, the Cole Mansion's main hall was filled with journalists and flashing cameras. The same crowd that had once hunted scandal now gathered for redemption. Ethan and Lena stood side by side behind a podium, facing the crowd. Ethan began first, his voice calm, controlled. The past few weeks have been challenging, not just for me, but for everyone connected to Cole Industries. Mistakes were made, but we faced them openly. This company was built on my father's belief that integrity is worth more than profit, and today, that belief remains. He paused, glancing at Lena. But what I learned through all of this is that integrity does not survive in isolation. It requires people who are unafraid to stand beside you when the world turns away. Then Lena stepped forward. Her voice was clear, grounded. Many of you have written stories about who you think we are. Some called this marriage a scandal, others called it a strategy. But what it became was something none of us expected, a reminder that honesty and kindness are still the most powerful currencies we have. The crowd fell silent. Cameras clicked, but no one interrupted. Ethan turned slightly toward her, his voice softer now, meant for her, but caught by every microphone in the room. You once told me that control is not strength. You were right. Strength is admitting you cannot do it alone. She looked at him, her expression gentle but resolute. Then maybe we are both learning. The press conference ended with a round of questions, flashes, and a quiet sense that something real had unfolded in front of them. That evening, after everyone had left, the mansion was quiet again. Lena stood on the balcony, the wind tugging lightly at her hair. Below, the river shimmered with reflected lights from the city. Ethan joined her, 2 glasses of tea in hand instead of champagne. No reporters, no contracts, he said softly. Just peace for once. Lena smiled, taking the glass. I will take peace over applause any day. He looked out at the skyline. My father used to say that truth builds slowly but lasts forever. I think I finally understand what he meant. You honored his legacy today, Lena said. He would have been proud. Ethan turned to her. I hope so, but I am not sure I would have gotten this far without you. She shook her head lightly. You just needed to remember who you were before the noise. He studied her for a moment. And who are you, Lena Hart? She smiled faintly. Someone who stopped running from her own worth. Oh, the wind carried a quiet stillness between them. For the first time, there was no pretense, no unspoken contract. Just two people standing in the space between what had been broken and what could be built. Ethan took a slow breath. The contract ends in 2 weeks. Lena nodded. I know. Do you plan on leaving when it does? She looked at him carefully. Do you plan on asking me to stay? His answer was quiet but certain. I do not want a contract anymore, Lena. I want a choice. Yours. Oh. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she smiled, the kind of smile that carried both forgiveness and promise. Then stop talking like a businessman and start acting like a man. Ethan laughed softly, the sound breaking the months of tension that had defined them. That sounds like the first honest order I have ever been given. The city lights shimmered below, and for the first time since their strange, accidental beginning, neither of them felt trapped by circumstance. They were no longer bound by paper or pride, but by something far more fragile and powerful: mutual respect, and the quiet beginning of love that asked for nothing but truth. The morning after the press conference, the world outside the Cole mansion seemed to move slower, quieter, as if the storm had finally passed. The air was crisp with the scent of rain, and the city skyline shimmered in soft light. For the first time in months, the papers spoke of Ethan Cole not as a scandal, but as a man who had chosen truth over power. Inside, Lena Hart stood by the kitchen window, a cup of tea warming her hands. Mrs. Dalton was humming softly as she prepared breakfast, her tone lighter than usual. The whole house felt different now, alive, but calm. When Ethan entered the room, he looked almost unrecognizable. His posture was still precise, his clothes still immaculate, but something in his eyes had changed. The sharpness that once kept everyone at a distance had softened into quiet resolve. You are up early, Lena said without turning. He smiled faintly. So are you. That is new. I could not sleep, she admitted. Too many things in my head. Good or bad things? He asked. She shrugged. A little of both. Ethan stepped closer, his tone gentle. Then maybe we talk about them. No more contracts, no more rules, just honesty. Lena turned to face him, the morning light catching her eyes. All right, honesty then. What happens now, Ethan? He exhaled slowly. Now, I rebuild the company from the ground up. Smaller, cleaner, transparent. It will take time, but I would rather have something real than something perfect. And what about us? She asked softly. His expression changed, his voice dropping to something sincere. That depends on whether you are still willing to be here when the rebuilding is done. Lena studied him for a moment. You are asking me to stay? I am asking you to choose, he said. Not because you have to, because you want to. She looked down at her tea, her thoughts quiet but clear. You know, when this started, I thought you were the most arrogant man I had ever met. Ethan laughed softly. That was fair. Oh, but somewhere along the way, she continued, you became someone who could admit when he was wrong. That is harder than it looks. He smiled, the kind that reached his eyes. It is easier when there is someone who refuses to give up on you. Later that afternoon, Lena decided to visit the bookstore she had once owned before everything changed. The small shop sat on a corner near the river, its faded sign still hanging above the door. Dust coated the shelves, and the faint smell of old paper filled the air. Ethan followed her quietly, hands in his pockets. So this is where it all started, he said, looking around. She nodded. I used to spend hours here, reading by the window. The world outside felt so far away. And now? She smiled faintly. Now it feels closer, maybe too close sometimes. He picked up an old book from the shelf, its pages yellowed with time. You built something small but meaningful here, he said. I spent years building something big and hollow. Lena looked at him. You can still fill it with meaning, Ethan. You just have to decide what kind. He turned the book in his hands thoughtfully. Then maybe it starts with giving this place back to you. She blinked, surprised. What do you mean? I bought this property months ago, he admitted. It was supposed to be demolished for a new project, but after everything that happened, I changed my mind. It is yours now, if you want it. Lena stared at him, speechless for a moment. Ethan, I cannot— Yes, you can, he interrupted gently. You built this with heart. It deserves to live again. Her eyes softened. You really are trying, aren't you? He smiled faintly. Trying to be the man you said I could be. She looked around the room, her hand brushing over the counter she once stood behind. Then maybe I will rebuild this too. Not for money, but for people who need stories to remind them they are not alone. Ethan nodded. That sounds like something my father would have believed in. Lena smiled. Maybe he would have liked me. He would have loved you, Ethan said quietly. The words hung in the air, unguarded and true. For the first time, neither of them tried to pull them back. That evening, they walked together along the river, the city lights shimmering in the water. The noise of traffic and distant music faded behind them, replaced by the rhythm of their footsteps. Ethan broke the silence first. I realized something today. My whole life, I chased the idea of control because I was afraid of being vulnerable. But vulnerability is not weakness, it is proof you are still human. Lena looked at him, her voice soft but steady. And being human means making mistakes, Ethan. What matters is what you do after them. He smiled. Then maybe what I do after this is learn how to live, not just lead. They stopped by the railing, watching the ripples of light move across the surface of the water. Lena turned to him. You know, when people watch our story online, they will think it is about wealth and redemption. But it is not. He raised an eyebrow. Then what is it about? She smiled. It is about a man who learned that love is not a transaction, and a woman who learned that pride does not have to mean walking away. Ethan's voice was barely above a whisper. And what happens next in that story? She took a slow breath. They stop pretending. They start healing. He reached for her hand, his grip firm but gentle. Then, let us start. The city lights shimmered brighter, the night air warm against their skin. For the first time, there were no lies, no contracts, no conditions, only the truth they had fought for, and the beginning of something real. Neither of them knew what the future would hold, but as they stood by the water, the silence between them felt like peace instead of distance. And in that peace, Ethan Cole and Lena Hart finally found what neither of them had been looking for, but both had needed all along: freedom through love, and love through honesty. The next week brought a rare kind of stillness to the Cole mansion. The chaos of the past months, the scandals, the accusations, the endless noise, had finally faded into the background. The world outside had moved on to new stories, but inside those quiet walls, something different was taking shape. Lena Hart had reopened her bookstore. The shelves were freshly cleaned, the windows polished until they gleamed. A small bell above the door chimed whenever someone entered, and the scent of old paper mixed with new beginnings filled the air. For the first time since her life had been turned upside down, she felt grounded again. That afternoon, Ethan Cole arrived unannounced. He stood in the doorway, dressed not in a suit, but in a simple gray shirt, with the sleeves rolled to his elbows. His presence filled the space, but his voice, when he spoke, was gentle. "So this is what peace looks like," he said. Lena looked up from behind the counter. "It looks like work to me. But I like it." He smiled. "I can see that. The place feels alive again." "It does," she said. "And for the first time, so do I." He walked slowly between the aisles, his fingers grazing the spines of the books. "You know, I never really read much before. I was always too focused on the next deal, the next project. Maybe that is because books do not negotiate," she said playfully. He chuckled. "Maybe. They just tell you the truth, whether you are ready for it or not." Lena closed the ledger she was working on. "So, what brings you here, Ethan? You do not strike me as the type to wander into small shops without a purpose." He hesitated for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "Maybe I am trying to understand what it feels like to build something for meaning instead of control." She studied him for a moment, her tone softening. "And what have you learned?" "That meaning takes courage," he said. and that I spent too long being afraid of it. Lena smiled faintly. It is never too late to start being brave. He met her eyes, and for a heartbeat, neither spoke. The quiet between them was not awkward, it was full of understanding. Later that evening, as the sun dipped low over the city, Ethan and Lena sat outside the shop with 2 cups of coffee. The street was calm, the hum of passing cars blending with the distant sounds of laughter from a nearby cafe. Ethan leaned back in his chair, looking relaxed in a way Lena had rarely seen. "I had a meeting this morning," he said. "The board approved the restructuring plan. Coal Industries will focus more on community projects from now on: education, small businesses, real work that matters." Lena smiled. "That sounds like something your father would have done." He nodded slowly. "That is the goal. I want the company to stand for what he believed in, not what I used to chase." She sipped her coffee, the steam curling in the cool evening air. "I think he would be proud of you." He looked at her, his expression sincere. "That means more than you think." "Oh." There was a long pause before he spoke again. "The contract we signed, it ends tomorrow." Lena nodded. "I know. Does it change anything?" he asked quietly. She took a moment before answering. "It changes everything, but not in the way you think." Ethan tilted his head. "What do you mean?" "When we started this, everything between us was forced timelines, signatures, rules. We built it on a lie. But what we have now, it is not built on paper. It is built on choice." He smiled slightly. "So what are you choosing?" Lena looked out toward the street, where the last streaks of sunlight touched the pavement. "I am choosing peace, and I am choosing honesty. Whether that includes you, depends on whether you can live that way too." Ethan leaned forward, his voice firm but tender. "Then let me earn it. Not because of the contract, not because of obligation, because I finally want to build something that lasts, and this time, not with numbers, but with faith." "Oh." Lena's gaze met his, unwavering. "Faith is not easy, Ethan. It means showing up when it is inconvenient. It means staying when things get hard." "I know," he said, "but I am not the man I was when this began." She smiled, a trace of warmth in her eyes. "No, you are not." He looked at her for a moment longer before saying, "Then maybe this is not the end of our story. Maybe it is just a new chapter." Lena laughed softly. "You have been spending too much time around my books." "Maybe," he admitted. "But it is not a bad thing to learn from the woman who taught me what truth sounds like." The city lights flickered on around them, casting golden reflections on the shop window. The sign above the door swayed gently in the breeze. "Heart's Books," painted in fresh white letters. Ethan stood, setting his empty cup on the table. "You know, there is a quote I read once," he said. "It went something like this: the strongest kind of love is the one that survives choice." "Oh." Lena looked up at him, her voice soft. "Then I guess we will see how strong ours is." He smiled, his gaze steady. "I am willing to find out." For a long moment, they stood there in the quiet, the city moving around them, but never through them. The noise of the world felt distant, replaced by something simple and true. When he finally left, he turned back once more. "I will come by tomorrow," he said. "Not as a husband, not as a contract, just as me." Lena watched him disappear into the night, her heart steady, her spirit light. She whispered into the cool air, "Then maybe tomorrow will be the beginning we were both waiting for." And as the bell above the door chimed softly in the breeze, it felt less like an ending and more like a promise, one born not from status or circumstance, but from choice, humility, and the quiet courage to begin again. The next morning arrived with soft light spilling through the bookstore windows. The bell above the door swayed gently in the breeze, and the air smelled faintly of coffee and ink. Lena Hart had opened the shop early, the quiet hours before the city awoke becoming her favorite part of the day. There was peace in routine, stacking books, sweeping the floor, adjusting displays, and for once, her heart did not feel like it was racing against time. She was arranging a new set of novels when she heard the bell chime. Turning, she saw Ethan Cole standing in the doorway. No suit. No driver waiting outside. Just a man holding a small paper bag and a shy kind of smile. "Good morning," he said. "I brought breakfast. I did not know what you liked, so I brought everything." Lena raised an eyebrow. "Everything?" He nodded. "Bagels, muffins, fruit, coffee, and something that looks like a croissant but might be an experiment. She laughed softly. You really do not do things halfway, do you? He smiled. Not anymore. Red. They sat by the front window, the city slowly waking beyond the glass. Ethan handed her a coffee, watching as she took a careful sip. So, he said, how does it feel, being free from the contract? Lena set her cup down. Strange, peaceful, but strange. It is like realizing you have been holding your breath for months and finally remembering how to breathe again. He nodded thoughtfully. I know that feeling. Only, in my case, it was not a contract. It was control. Every decision, every plan, every risk, it was all about keeping the illusion that I had everything under control. Turns out, I was the one trapped by it. Lena looked at him, her tone gentle. And now? He smiled faintly. Now I am learning to let go. She studied him for a moment. You know, I never thought I would say this, but I think I like this version of you better. He tilted his head, amused. The version without a boardroom or a private driver? The version who shows up with breakfast and no agenda, she replied. He chuckled softly. Then I will try to keep him around. For a moment, they sat in quiet comfort. The morning sunlight painted everything in gold. And Lena found herself thinking that maybe, just maybe, this was what healing looked like, not a dramatic transformation, but a gentle return to something simple and true. Around noon, a young woman entered the shop, carrying a small notepad and a camera. Excuse me, she said politely. Are you Lena Hart? Yes, Lena replied, setting down the book she had been shelving. My name is Claire. I am a reporter with the City Journal. I wanted to ask if you would be open to an interview. Your story and Mr. Cole's has inspired a lot of people. Ethan, who had been browsing nearby, turned at the mention of his name. Lena smiled cautiously. An interview? I am not sure there is much more to say. Claire shook her head. I think there is. People are calling your story a modern fairy tale. The millionaire who learned humility, the woman who taught him what love means. But from what I can tell, it is not about wealth at all. It is about rebuilding trust. Lena hesitated, glancing at Ethan. He gave a small nod, leaving the choice to her. Finally, she said, All right, but if you are going to tell the story, tell it right. Oh, Claire smiled. I would like that. They sat near the back of the shop, the shelves casting soft shadows around them. The reporter asked questions about the past months, the contract, the scandal, the reconciliation, but Lena's answers were simple, grounded. I did not marry him for money, she said. I married him because life sometimes throws you into impossible situations. What matters is what you learn from them. And what did you learn? Claire asked. That kindness does not make you weak, Lena said. That pride can be a prison. And that real love does not need to be announced. It proves itself in action. When the interview ended, Claire thanked them and promised to send a draft before publication. As she left, the bell over the door rang again, the sound fading into the afternoon stillness. Ethan looked at Lena with quiet admiration. You handled that perfectly. She shrugged. I just told the truth. It is easier now that I am not pretending. He smiled. You make honesty sound effortless. It is not, she said softly. It just hurts less than hiding. As the sun began to set, Ethan helped her close the shop. They moved in easy rhythm, stacking books, locking cabinets, turning off the lights. When everything was done, they stepped outside together, the evening air cool and gentle. The city around them glowed with streetlights, the soft hum of life filling the distance. Ethan turned to her, his voice low. Do you ever wonder how different everything would have been if we had met under normal circumstances? Lena thought for a moment. Maybe we would have liked each other faster, or maybe we would have ignored each other completely. He smiled. Either way, I'm glad we met the way we did, because the chaos made it real. She looked at him, her eyes warm. It was never about how we started, Ethan. It is about who we became. He nodded slowly. Then let us keep becoming. They walked in silence for a while, the rhythm of their steps matching the quiet beat of the city. The air carried the faint scent of rain, the kind that came at the end of peaceful days. When they reached the corner, Ethan stopped. Lena, I want to ask you something. She turned to him. What is it? He took a breath, his voice steady but sincere. If I ever forget how to live like this, how to stay grounded, how to stay honest, promise me you will remind me. Lena smiled, her answer soft but sure. Only if you promise to listen. He nodded. Deal. Oh. The light turned green, and they crossed the street together, side by side, not bound by paper or circumstance, but by a quiet choice renewed with every step. And as the evening wind moved gently through the city, it carried with it a feeling neither of them could quite name, something like peace, something like hope, and something dangerously close to love. The following days moved quietly, marked not by headlines or grand gestures, but by small, steady moments of rebuilding. The city had shifted its attention elsewhere, leaving Ethan Cole and Lena Hart to rediscover what ordinary life could feel like. For once, there were no reporters at the gate, no contracts waiting to be signed, no cameras demanding a version of them that was easier to sell. Each morning, Ethan would stop by the bookstore before heading to the office. Sometimes he came with coffee, sometimes with silence, but always with the same calm steadiness that Lena had come to recognize. He had become less the man who led an empire, and more the man who wanted to understand his own heart. One morning, as sunlight streamed through the windows, Lena was sorting through a stack of donated books when Ethan entered. He carried a brown envelope in his hand, his expression thoughtful. "I have something for you," he said. She looked up, curious. "That sounds serious." He handed her the envelope. Inside was a single document, a letter from the Cole Foundation, announcing a new scholarship program. At the bottom was her name, listed as co-founder. Lena stared at it, speechless. "Ethan, what is this?" "It is called the Heart Scholarship," he said softly. "It is for students who cannot afford education, but have the courage to keep trying anyway. You once told me kindness should mean action. This is my way of listening." Her throat tightened. "You did not have to do this." I know," he said. "That is why it matters." For a long moment, Lena could not speak. Then she smiled, small, honest, full of the quiet gratitude words could not carry. "You have changed, Ethan." He met her gaze. "No, you changed me." They stood there in the morning light, surrounded by shelves filled with stories of transformation, and for once, they were living one of their own. That afternoon, as Ethan prepared to leave for a meeting, Lena walked him to the door. "You should know," she said with a teasing smile. "I might tell the next customer that the famous Ethan Cole now works part-time here for free." He laughed, shaking his head. "If it helps business, I will not argue." "It is not about business," she said gently. "It is about showing people that redemption is possible." He paused, his expression softening. "Then I will make sure they see it." "Oh." As he stepped outside, the city stretched before them, bright, loud, and endlessly alive. The same world that once judged them now simply moved on, unaware that two people had quietly rewritten their story in its shadow. Ethan turned back once more before getting into his car. "Lena, I will see you tonight?" She nodded. "You better." And as he drove away, Lena watched him disappear into the flow of traffic, her heart steady. For the first time since their strange beginning, she knew their story was no longer about survival or pretense. It was about becoming. And becoming, she realized, was the truest kind of love there was. A week later, the bookstore had become more than just a place for stories. It had become a small refuge for people who wanted to start over, just as Lena Hart and Ethan Cole once had. The sign in the window now read, "Open for words and second chances." Lena spent the morning setting up a display for the new scholarship program, her name printed alongside Ethan's on a simple, elegant poster. The words, "The Heart Scholarship, for those who still believe in hope," stood proudly beneath it. As she straightened the frame, she caught her reflection in the glass. For the first time in years, she saw someone who was not surviving anymore, she was living. When Ethan arrived, he was carrying a small box. His sleeves were rolled up, his hair slightly out of place from the wind, and there was something different about the way he moved, easier, lighter. "What is that?" Lena asked, wiping her hands on a cloth. He smiled. "Something for the store. A reminder of where we started." She opened the box and found an engraved plaque. It read, "This bookstore stands as proof that truth outlives scandal, kindness outshines pride, and love, real love, needs no contract." Lena traced the words with her fingers. "You wrote this?" "I did," he said. I wanted something permanent, something that says we were more than the mistakes we made. She looked at him, emotion stirring quietly in her chest. You really mean that, do you not? I do, Ethan said simply. For a long time, I thought success meant control. Now I know it means building something that matters even when no one is watching. They placed the plaque near the counter, right beside the register. As they stood back to look at it, a small group of customers entered: students, parents, even a few reporters who had once chased headlines. They all paused to read the inscription. An older woman smiled at Lena. You two built something beautiful here. Lena returned the smile. We did, and it is just the beginning. Ethan glanced at her, his eyes soft but sure. Beginnings seem to be our specialty. The day passed in quiet contentment. By evening, as the last customer left and the sun painted gold across the shelves, Ethan turned to her. You know, when this all started, I thought I was saving my reputation. But what I really found was purpose. Lena looked at him gently. And what did purpose teach you? He smiled faintly. That love is not a transaction to manage, it is a truth you protect. She nodded, her voice soft. Then maybe that is our legacy. Outside, the city glowed beneath the setting Sunday. Inside, two people stood side by side, not as a contract fulfilled, but as a promise kept. And though neither of them said it aloud, they both knew this was not an ending. It was the life they had fought for finally beginning. A few months later, spring arrived in the city. The air was warmer, the trees lined with pale blossoms, and the river reflected a quiet kind of brightness that only came after long seasons of struggle. The noise of the world had moved on from Ethan Cole and Lena Hart's story. But in one small corner of New York, inside a bookstore that had become a sanctuary, their new chapter was still unfolding. The morning sun poured through the windows, casting golden light across the shelves. Lena was behind the counter, carefully unpacking a shipment of books. Her hands moved slowly, but her mind wandered to how far they had come, to how easily it could have all fallen apart, and to how somehow it had not. The bell over the door chimed, and Ethan stepped in. He wore a light jacket, no tie, no rush in his step. He looked every bit like a man who had finally made peace with his own reflection. In his hand was a bouquet of white tulips. You are late, Lena teased without looking up. I was buying flowers, he said. You said the shop needed color. She looked at him then, smiling. I meant plants, not tulips. Too late, he replied with a grin. These are symbolic. She raised an eyebrow. Symbolic of what? He set them on the counter. Forgiveness, renewal, maybe something about beginnings, too. Lena's voice softened. I think we have had enough beginnings. Ethan nodded, his smile turning thoughtful. Then maybe it is time for something else. She looked at him curiously. And what would that be? He hesitated for a moment, then reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small, folded piece of paper. Do you remember the first contract we ever signed? Lena laughed quietly. How could I forget? You had every word written in bold, like I would try to escape. Well, he said, unfolding the paper, I thought it was time we replaced it. She frowned slightly, taking the paper from his hand. Her eyes moved across the words slowly. It was handwritten, simple and sincere. It read, This agreement is not bound by law or obligation. It is a promise between two people who learned that honesty outlasts wealth, and kindness is stronger than pride. This contract is to build not walls, but a home. Signed, if you agree, with choice instead of ink. Lena looked up, her eyes bright with something she did not try to hide. You wrote this? I did, Ethan said quietly. And this time, I do not want your signature. I just want your word. She folded the paper gently, her voice barely above a whisper. You already have it. For a moment, silence filled the shop, soft, golden, and perfect. The kind of silence that did not need to be broken to be understood. Ethan smiled and glanced around. You know, this place feels like home now. Lena looked at him. It always was. You just had to learn how to see it. He nodded, his tone soft. And you taught me how. Oh. They spent the rest of the day side by side, helping customers, sharing small jokes, and living moments that would never make headlines but meant everything anyway. When the sun began to set, Ethan locked the front door, flipping the sign to closed. The last light of day washed over the shelves, and the world outside seemed to slow down. Lena leaned against the counter, watching him quietly. "You know, when I met you, I thought you were the most impossible man I had ever known." Ethan smiled. That was accurate. "But now," she continued, "I think you are just a man who learned how to listen." He chuckled softly. "That might be the nicest thing anyone has ever said to me." "It is not a compliment," she said with mock seriousness. "It is a reminder." He laughed, shaking his head. "Noted." Then, his tone softened again. "You changed everything, Lena. You made the noise quiet. You made the chaos mean something." She met his gaze, her voice calm but full. "We changed everything, Ethan. Together." The city outside glowed in the reflection of the shop window, the streets alive with quiet movement. It was the same city that had once judged them, now passing by without a glance. Inside, it felt like the world had finally caught up to peace. Ethan placed his hand gently over hers on the counter. "Do you ever think about how strange it all was? How something that started with a dare, with pride, turned into this?" Lena smiled. "Life has a way of making the wrong turns lead to the right place." He nodded slowly. "Then I am glad I got lost." She laughed softly. "You were never lost, Ethan. You were just waiting to be found." Outside, the city lights began to glow brighter, reflecting off the window where their names Ethan Cole and Lena Hart were printed together on the small plaque by the door. The tulips rested in a vase beside it, white against the warm light. As the evening deepened, they stood there for a while, neither speaking, neither needing to. And when Ethan finally said, "Let us go home," Lena smiled, turned off the lights, and walked beside him into the quiet street. Two people who had been broken, rebuilt, and now simply were. There was no more pretending, no more proving, just truth. And in that truth, they found the one thing no contract could ever promise forever, built on choice.